like my coffee ground coarse.
I like mine fine, of course.
I see she drives too fast for me.
I think he drives too carefully.
She laughs at those stupid rom-com flicks.
And he laughs at that stupid old slapstick.
As Bruce was talking, I was thinking about my relationship with my oldest daughter. Now, we're really close, and the fascinating thing I see with my daughter Carmel is she seems to have the ability to see into me and know exactly what I'm thinking when we're having a joke or talking, having a conversation, or when I'm talking about any particular subject or cracking a joke or being witty or anything like that.
Witty.
Yeah. Witty. Witty. Witty, yes. Carmel is switched on. She seems to know exactly where I'm coming from, and my wife is just oblivious to this relationship that we have. And she will admit that
this is being recorded.
Yes. Yes.
Just saying.
Yes, I'll say it. She never watches the video, so I can say anything I like.
One courageous man.
Well, but she will admit this, that Carmel and I have this unusual relationship, and it's almost like we're one. That she's female and I'm male. There is distinction, but there's an unusual sort of union between us. And I think the relationship, that can be a description between the relationship and the father and the son, is that there's such depth that they have in their communion and union that that goes much further than I can ever imagine with my own daughter, and my daughter will admit with me. So that's how I see how the father and son is at work. That they have a relationship, they have a closeness, they have an identity in each other, an assurance and affirmation that they have between each other that goes to a much greater degree that we can understand. I think it was Timothy Ware that says, coined the term, "I need you so I can be myself." And that's something that struck me from that paper, The Human Person as an Icon of the Trinity. I need you so I can be myself. Now, in the Trinity, we have love, relationship, community, and which all springs from personhood. But if we try and understand this distinction and union from individualism, it's fraught with difficulties. You just can't start from an individual. You've got to start from a person. And a person is persona, face to face. It's sounding through. This is all the original meanings of what it means to be a person. Face to face confrontation, peaceful confrontation. Will bring out qualities within another person, or if it's an abusive confrontation, it has a damaging effect. But there's nothing but peace, love, harmony, relationship coming from the Father and the Son towards us. So that brings us alive. But if we're in an abusive relationship, that squashes us, pushes us down. So I believe that union and distinction is of the utmost importance, because it really brings out who we are as persons, which is opposite to individuals. So if you stay away from individualism, I think you'll get a better grasp and understanding of what union and distinction is all about.
So I think the question that the person was asking me, though, is sometimes you get told about this unity of the Spirit, which is often just another way of saying, just do what the pastor says, otherwise there'll be trouble. And if you don't do what the pastor says, they accuse you of not holding the unity of the Spirit. But of course, the unity of the Spirit doesn't mean that you lose your distinction. You don't just wear a uniform and do what, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. You actually be a genuine community that's in the unity of the Spirit is all about distinction, and there will be differences. differences in there's the incredible diversity. There's a recognition of femininity and masculinity, not the diminishing of it, not the flattening of it. There's not the castration of men and the suppression of women, but rather there's the elevation of women and the release of masculinity. There's that all going on together. There is a recognition of different levels of maturity without one being better than the other. Rather the strong look after the weak, rather than the strong dominating the weak. There is, as you see in the early church, there was just spontaneous giving of the rich to the poor, and of rich communities to poor communities. And then there is a spontaneous recognition, or ought to be, of different races and different kinds of people. And in fact, in Corinthians, when there was an issue of the rich not looking out for the poor, and Paul said that's why the communion, the having of the Lord's Supper, was not being done correctly, because they were using the Lord's Supper to dominate one group of people by another group of people. But the unity of the Spirit isn't about wearing a uniform and doing as you're told. It's actually about growing into the diversity and allowing the diversity and celebrating the diversity in a group of people, and allowing those unique things about each person and each type of person to actually be brought to the forward, which then adds to the overall sense of, again, it's a multiplicity of colour instead of a beige kind of uniform.
I'm fine.
Well, one of the things I think you said that we'd like to bring up every session, and I'd like some response from you guys on this. I think you've said very clearly the situation, the way things are, and what has been done on our behalf for us and what we're called into. But I guess the question that is on everyone's lips is, how then shall we live?
Okay, so what you need to do is you need to now realise that you're separated from God. Right? And because you're separated, you need to get back. Right? And I've got the special knowledge by which you can get back. I do.
And I'm his prophet.
Yeah, he's a prophet. He's a prophet. And what you need to do, you need to send us money. Because I hear directly from God. I hear God, a treasurer. I hear directly from God because God speaks to me, and now I'm your mediator. And because you're separated, I can now trigger inside your brains fear and guilt, and the angst can take off, and you've got to get back. And while you're like that, you're mine, and you can keep coming, and you can pay the money, and that's how now you should live. Is that right? Okay, what happened? See, I played one side, and look what happens to your brain. We just played it, not to make fun of it, but to show you what happens to your brain. Now, we tell you that, as David said, people come in, I know all these things about you, and we trigger, and he says, you are loved, you are included, you are accepted, you are in union with God. He loves you, right? You're safe and secure. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. Your identity is caught up in him. You are a child of the Father and the Son and the Spirit. And you go, oh, I am. And then your brain switches over into your amygdala switches into your love side. Your whole neurohumoral brain worldview changes. You're in another universe. So how are you to live? Step one, you start by living by believing the gospel. You believe that A, he's in you. B, that you're loved. It's not that we love him, but he first loved us. And as I'm loved, we then develop a bit. We go, oh, gee, if he loves me, maybe I can love myself. There's a strange thought. And then as I love myself a bit more, Jesus says, love one another as I've loved you. So we say, oh, my first thing is to keep receiving Jesus' love, and then love your neighbour as yourself. As you know you're loved, I can now love Stuart. So when you look at it, it's from within union, there's this river coming out saying you are loved. We're meant to stay in the river, know we're loved, love ourselves and we love our neighbour. And then what does that look like? As mentioned, every colour under the rainbow. There's no way it looks any particular. It looks different in different places. So how do we live? We start by letting ourselves be loved. So Jesus' command isn't love God, love your neighbour. That's the summary of the law. He says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as, conjunction, I've loved you, conjunction, as I've loved you. In other words, let me love you so you can love yourself and you can love each other. So how are we meant to live? What does this look like? Being loved.
Yeah, so there's another aspect to all that too, how you live that out, because the way we're presenting it sounds like it's heaven on earth, and in one sense it is heaven coming to earth. When we pray the Lord's Prayer, we're actually praying for that. We're praying, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, but nonetheless, I don't know about you, but there's a couple of people in my life I don't get on that well with. Yeah, it happened to me. Yeah. And I'll just let that one pass. But that doesn't mean that you live in a, that you have to live in. We don't live in paradise on earth, do we? But we can still live by grace and forgiveness, and that is that. I remember the 1970s, I think it was. There was a story called Love Story. There was a movie called Love Story, and it's remembered for one line in the movie, which is, "Love means never having to say you're sorry." Well, that's garbage. That's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard. Love means saying sorry all the time and forgiving all the time. And so being ready to admit that you need help and being ready to forgive is really significant. In fact, I was just reading today about something Scott Peck said. If you ever get a chance to read his book, People of the Lie, he describes a difference between what he calls sin and what he calls evil. He says we all sin, we do stupid things, but evil is not being able to admit that you sin, like what we were doing before, just for fun. But that means that you cannot say sorry and you cannot forgive because you put yourself above. And so in a community of faith, in a community of faith, we're not talking about paradise on earth. Paradise is, the heaven coming to earth is yet to take place, but we have the hope of glory here and now, and it's the hope of that gives us the capacity to not be too precious about ourselves. So you can laugh at yourself, you can forgive yourself, and you most importantly forgive others. And otherwise a community cannot survive. It will fragment and fall apart.
So, if we take that forward, how do we live? If Christ is in me, I've got to recognise Christ in David. And I've got to recognise Christ in Wes. And Christ in Stuart. And Christ in my enemy. Christ in our enemy. And Christ in the people who are right under our skin and we're really annoyed with. You with me? You see how it flows out? If Christ is in union with me and he's in union with all, this is the foundation of the understanding in the Western democracies of tolerance. Although they don't understand where it comes from. They don't understand that we have to respect and honour each person as a person because Christ is in them. And because Christ is in them, we therefore recognise him in others. Now, if I lose Christ in my enemy, and I fail to see him as a child of God, whether I think he's blind or not, I'm going to end up losing Christ in my friend or my brother. You with me? Because if I lose him you lose Christ in my enemy, I've objectified him. I've called him a something or other. I've called him a religious name. I've called him a Christian or a Buddhist, or I've labelled him. I've objectified them, male, female, other. I've objectified them so they're no longer a person. And then once they're no longer a person, they can be subject to morality or judgment, and I'm the judge, and then we can kill them in different ways, literally blow them up, or we can kill them with our words. So we can only objectify, once we've objectified people and we have them with no longer Christ in them, we can use morality, and then we can bring destruction and death on them, which is a tree that brings death. We're told not to eat of it. Right? But if Christ is in all, if Christ is in all, and if I see him in my enemy, Christ commands me to love my enemy. Christ is in my enemy, which means I can't objectify anyone. Can you see how this really, this is, David says, is this, glory, fairy floss heaven? This is really hard yards. I don't know about you, but in the last 8 years, I've had grinding out in relationships. I've had to really work through difficult relational things with people, staying in connection, working it through, having discussions. Did you say, you didn't say? Well, let's forget the right one. What did you mean? Aren't we about connection here? Aren't we about union? You with me? Can you see, this doesn't flow into just fantasy land. This actually has got really, really gritty beauty in it. Really gritty beauty. If Christ is in me, and I can see that, if I can see him as my enemy, I can't objectify my enemy, I can't judge and destroy him. I've got to keep him as my friend. Can you see this is the foundation of how we're meant to live? So, what's this mean? Well, it means we live.
But I love her, 'cause she's different than me.
I love that rich red wine.
I don't, so she drinks mine.
He likes to dream a while.
She dances in the grocery aisle. She still laughs at things like passing gas.